We're up.
All right. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Jack Currier. I serve you as the chair of the Zoning Board. This is the Nashua Zoning Board of Adjustment, so I hope you're here for this meeting. Our agenda tonight is located on that table in the middle in the back of the room, so if you don't have a copy of the agenda for tonight, feel free to get one for yourself. Before we get going, I ask if you have a cell phone, if you could put it on silent or turn it off. The meeting tonight is recorded actually in 3 venues. It's recorded on TV. We're live tonight. It's also an audio recording. And then there is a written transcript, which is the third method that this is recorded. So because of that, I ask that one and only one person speaks at a time. Whoever is speaking, I ask that you would identify yourself. And if the spelling of your name isn't obvious, I'll ask you to spell it so we can get the record right, because the written record is very important. A lot of these cases can be kind of simple, but sometimes they end up in court, and it is our job to have a clean record. So before I go a little further, I'll introduce the other members here. To my right is Mary Ellen McKay. She serves as the clerk. Going around the table is J.P. Boucher. He's our vice chair. We also have Rob Shaw and Steve Lionel and their members. To my left, to your right, is Mr. Carter Falk. He serves on the staff as a deputy planning manager. So a few things tonight. We're here tonight to hear both variances and special exceptions, and I'll spend a few moments describing what those are. We're all here tonight because of this big book, this thick book, which has been approved by the Board of Aldermen. And there's lots of detail in here, and so the cases before us tonight are asking for a variance or a special exception from this code, and those are 2 slightly different things. And I'll first speak about the variance. By New Hampshire law, at least 3 of the 5 members here would need to vote affirmative to approve any variance. And a variance is essentially a deviation from the law, and there's 5 criteria that this board needs to find for each variance. And I'll briefly tick through the 5 criteria. Number 1 is that the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. Number 2, the spirit of the ordinance is observed. Number 3, substantial justice is done. 4 of 5 is that the values of surrounding properties are not diminished. And that number 5 of 5 is that literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship to the landowner. So that's the 5 criteria that this board looks for in each variance. We're also hearing for some special exception tonight, and there's 5 slightly different criteria. It's a slightly lower bar for this board to approve a special exception. The first is that the use is listed in the table of uses. And the special exception before us tonight is listed in the table of uses. Number 2 is that the requested use and activity will not create undue traffic congestion or unduly impair pedestrian safety. Number 3, the requested use and activity will not overload any public water, drainage, or sewer system. Number 4 is that any special exceptions regulations for the use activity set forth in other sections of the zoning code, zoning ordinance are fulfilled. And then number 5 is that the requested use or activity will not impair the integrity or be out of character with the district or immediate neighborhood. So that's the 5 criteria for a special exception. So each case tonight, there's 2 components to each case. The first component is the public hearing. The public hearing is where we, this board, hears from you, the public, and it starts with the applicant. The applicant will have up to 15 minutes to present their case. The cases have already been compiled in a written request, and this board has each of those requests. It's oftentimes we go and visit the site. I know I do that myself for each case. We have a timer here. That timer ticks down from 15 minutes. From minute 0 to 14, the light will be green. From 14 to 15, it'll be yellow, and at 15 minutes, it'll turn red. If you're still presenting at that time, I'll be asking you to wrap up your presentation. The board is likely to have questions for the applicant, and after the applicant has spoken and the questions of this board are exhausted, anybody else who would like to speak in favor of the application will have up to 5 minutes. 5 minutes, so the light will be green from minute 0 to 4, and then yellow from 4 to 5, and then turn red at 5. Now, after all positive testimony for each application is received, anyone with questions, concerns, or opposition about any application will have up to 5 minutes to present their case. If there is opposition, then the applicant will be asked to come back to the microphone to present any, say, opposing testimony to the opposition they've heard. And then the last person to speak will be one of the folks who has spoken in opposition, if there was opposition. And after that 5 minutes, then the public meeting will conclude and the public hearing will begin, and the public hearing will conclude and the public meeting will begin. And the public meeting is where the 5 of us are likely to deliberate on the case. If we have some questions that come up during the public meeting, it is sometimes we do reopen the public hearing to get some clarifying specific questions asked. So if you have an interest in a case, we ask that you stay until not only the public hearing but the public meeting has concluded. So again, there's 5 cases before us tonight. A few other points is that there's a 30-day window of appeal for any decision we make. So whether we affirm a variance or special exception or deny it, there's a 30-day window of appeal. And bear in mind that within that 30 days, any party of standing can request a rehearing request. Mr. Falk could answer any questions on that, but there's a 30-day window of appeal. And if we receive a rehearing request and this board decides to rehear it, whatever decision we made, whether it was affirmative or a denial, would be stayed until the case is reheard. So if you file a request to rehear and this board decides not to hear it, the next step for your grievance would be to go to Hillsborough County Superior Court. So with that, are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from anyone in the audience before we get going? Seeing none, I guess we'll open the public hearing on case number 1. Case number 1, the owner is TMAC Realty Trust. The applicant is, it's the owner and applicant. It's 230 Amherst Street, and the following is being requested. This is a use variance to operate a residential recovery residence, also defined in our code as a halfway house for substance abuse. And number 2, a variance to allow proposed use within a quarter mile of a hotel and also within a quarter mile of a nursery school preschool. Specifically, a quarter mile is 1,320 feet. The hotel is 983 feet away, and the school is 1,272 feet away. So good evening. If you'd like to give us your name and address for the record and walk us through your application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, my name is Joe Puglia. I'm an attorney with the office at School in Nashville. I'm here this evening representing the applicant. The building is located on Amherst Street at the exit ramp going south. The exit ramp goes down this way, Amherst Street. It's right at the corner. There's a gasoline station.
Can you grab the mic?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Oh,
You
well.
can pull that out and just take it.
Oh, you pull out. Thank you, Mr. Shaw. It is located on Amherst Street at the exit ramp. It's up on a little hill I think you're all familiar with, and I know you all visit the site prior to the meetings this evening. It's an existing 2-story office building with over 50 parking places in the rear of the building. At various times, it has been used as a ski shop. At one time of Ken Jones, those of us that go back a little bit, remember Ken Jones operated a ski shop out of there. It's been a real estate office for most of the time. And it's one of the reasons why, at this present time, this building is having a little problem as far as leasing it. At the present time, there are 32 offices in that building, 32 rooms. Only 6 of them are being used. The rest are not being used. It's kind of a lot that doesn't have enough size to really attract retail, even though retail at the present time is not very active in the area or any area as far as trying to put up buildings in that particular situation, in a situation. What is being proposed is the ordinance calls it a halfway house. It's sometimes interesting, and it's a good thing that sometimes when I lecture this board about why it's here and so forth, but retail is down, office space is down, but the need for this type of a facility is up. And we'll learn that a little bit later when Ms. Canterbury will talk for a few minutes, excuse me, about what the procedure is and what New Hampshire is facing in this regard, and the need for this type of building. The building itself lends itself to this type thing, to use because of the fact that it has 62 rooms which can be converted into residences. There will be treatment on the site and off the site as needed. The distances, I believe when the ordinance was passed, they wanted to make sure that it wasn't easy for people living in these halfway houses to easily be able to walk to other uses such as schools and so forth. So they put in the 1/4 mile. In this particular place, if you understand it, the closest place is the inn across the street, and it's about 1,000 feet away. We need about 1,300, so it's about 300. And in the rear, in the church in the rear of that building on, I forget the name of the street right now, there's a St. Laurent Street. There's a church that has a nursery. Getting there in this particular instance would be very difficult because we've got the turnpike, it's up on a hill, got a shopping center in front of it. So I think that the reason for it is not available, is not necessary in this particular situation. There's no exterior changes being proposed. Most of the changes will be done interiorly. It has plenty of parking. At this point in time, it really has a public interest in having this type of a building rehabilitated for the use of a halfway house. It's an island unto itself as far as other residents in the area. And as I say, the exterior of the house, of the building will stay the same. The interior will be changed. If you'd like, I'd like to just have Ms. Canterbury give her speech, and which is not going to be more than a couple of minutes. And then if the board wants it, we'll be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Fine.
Thank you,
Yep.
Mr. Chairman. Ms. Canterbury. State your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Erin Canterbury, spelled like the town and the tails. I reside at 300 Walnut Street in Manchester, New Hampshire. And thank you to the members of the board for hearing me this evening. I have been a proud citizen of New Hampshire for most of my life. I work in the addiction treatment field, but more importantly, I'm an advocate for those suffering with addiction, and I am also a person that has been in long-term recovery for almost 7 years. Working on the front lines of the crisis and having experienced addiction myself, I can say without a doubt that New Hampshire needs more options. In 2016, New Hampshire lost 479 people to drug overdose. That's 479 mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, brothers, and sisters. New Hampshire is currently ranked as number 2 per capita in the U.S. for drug overdose deaths, second only to Ohio. I work closely with Governor Sununu's newly appointed advisor on addiction and mental health. His name is, not coming to me, Dave Mara. He was just appointed as our drug czar 2 weeks ago. So there are things being worked on, and I work closely with him. So, I'm sorry. Another, I think, more shocking statistic, we are ranked as number 49 of the 50 states for access to mental health and drug addiction treatment, Texas being number 50. There's usually a small window when an individual suffering with addiction will be willing to go to treatment, usually because of fear of withdrawal symptoms or simply of fear of being judged. On many occasions, when that person is ready to make that step, many treatment centers are at capacity and that person is put on a waiting list and may no longer be willing to find treatment at that point. With an increase in services, lives would be saved, crime would decrease, and individuals with an addiction will be given another chance at a healthy life, a life in recovery. To this day, I have not met a person in recovery who says they were happier when they were actively using. There are millions of people in long-term recovery in the US. Treatment works, people do recover. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Canterbury? I think we're all set. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, my case is complete, unless the board has questions, but I think most of the advertising that or statements I have to make, you read every night in the newspaper.
Mr. Lionel?
Who is actually going to be doing the renovating and running this facility? I didn't see that in the documents.
It will be people that are, well, why don't I bring up the individual that is doing this already so that you know, and he can explain that in more detail, so that you,
Good evening.
state your name and address.
Terry McMahon, 73 Wendover Way, Bedford, New Hampshire. I own a part of a business called United Recovery Centers, and that's a Jacksonville-based drug and alcohol recovery center business and a recovery residence business. You might wonder why I ended up there. I actually was the benefactor of a liver transplant in January. I was on a list too. It wasn't a list for to get into treatment. It was a list to survive, and I was granted that. And I went to a recovery center to because I was required to do so. And I got exposed to something that I never thought was the world that we lived in. And long story short, once I was saved by a transplant, I bought the center. And lifelong, most of my life here in New Hampshire, almost 30 years. I ran insurance franchises. I've employed hundreds of people here in New Hampshire. And we expect to come into New Hampshire, help people get better, get healthy, transition into a better life and recovery, productive people. And we are nationally approved by the National Association of Recovery Residences. We are approved in Florida, which is the standard to make sure the homes are properly cared for and clean and comfortable in a safe environment for people to get better. It's a 24-hour oversight and very valuable. And I spoke with Mayor Donchis a couple months ago when I got better. I flew up here. I'm still getting treated in Jacksonville at the Mayo Clinic, but he seemed to be pretty supportive of the concept. We didn't need funds. We were going to fund this privately, but we just need a variance so we can have a safe place for these people to get better.
I think in answering Mr. Lionel's question, what type of professionals do you use to
Oh,
help these people?
we have a medical director that oversees the patients, a psychiatrist. We give them access to that. We also have trained clinical professionals, so they're all properly licensed. We've interviewed, here in New Hampshire, there's not a shortage of professionals. There's a shortage of centers and building and spaces to do the practicing.
Mr. Boucher?
So can you just kind of briefly, just explain the operation and basically more of the physical part of it, you know, what would one expect to see? You know, is there people there going in and out round the clock? Is it you have people
well,
that are there to support them or to watch what's going on? Just try to explain.
Good question. I mean, you're there to do work. It's typically a 30-day program where someone who is suffering from the disease of addiction will come to get treatment. It'll be a dorm-style, very comfortable living community. The community is one of the important elements to this. They are in Jacksonville. I can only speak to the program there. We do, we take our guests sailing. We take them to music programs. They do art. They do intensive in and outpatient therapy. We have 24-hour. There's always somebody in the building. There's always someone monitoring. We have an impeccable track record. We are one of the very first facilities in Jacksonville to be approved for the national standard, which is here in New Hampshire now, but isn't policy yet.
Ms., are you all set?
Yeah, what's up?
Ms. McKay?
Thank you. About how many staff do you think will be in the building at any one time? And how many clients, if you were at full capacity, how many clients would you expect that would?
Well, to answer your question, there's a generally acceptable ratio for staff to clients. I know this will probably on the low end create as many as 15 new jobs here in Nashua, as high as 30. Our capacity will be based upon what I understand to be a pretty vibrant waiting list here in New Hampshire, as much as 6 months. So estimates from the architecture drawings is anywhere between a low of 20 and a high of 25 residents. But we also have a program where people can come and enjoy, and experience our program in what's called an outpatient environment too. So that's difficult to say because of we haven't gone with the drawings, but I'd say we probably help as many as 30 people per month and employ anywhere between 15 and 30 new people here in Nashua.
Follow up?
Sure.
Do you expect this will be age 18 and above or age 21 and above? Do you expect?
We're only currently treating adults, so it's 18 and above. 8 out of 10 are male right now, statistically. So we haven't determined, depending on the specs of the architectural drawings and of who the residences will be, but it'll be anywhere between 20 and 25, I think.
Thank you very much.
And just to define, our average age in Florida this is younger persons. Typically, it's people between the ages of 20 and 28.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
I think we're all set. Thank you, Mr. McMahon.
Questions? Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Is there anybody else to speak in favor of this proposed facility at 230 Amherst Street? Is there anyone with questions, concerns, or opposition? Questions, concerns, or opposition to 230 Amherst Street? Seeing none, we have no emails or written opposition. So with that, I will close the public hearing and open the public meeting. How are you, Ms. McKay? Subject matter expert?
Yeah, well, the subject matter, unfortunately, is something we really need. I don't think I can honestly and in good faith object to this. I know how badly this state needs this. I know what we've done up in Concord around trying to get more beds. All I think of is emergency rooms where people are waiting up to 30 days to find a bed. This is 20 to 25 beds. I commend the people that want to bring this forward, actually. New Hampshire needs this, and we need it desperately.
Thank you for those thoughts of support. Mr. Lionel?
Given, well, the issue before us is specifically the distance between this facility and nearby hotel and the nursery school, given that the hotel is not only across Amherst Street, but it's also across the Everett Turnpike, and the nursery school is also far away and that's not a very walkable area, I don't have a problem with this.
Thank you. Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, I concur. I mean, the second variance is also about this being in basically a non-residential area. If anything, I think you probably generally would have greater concerns expressed when something like this is placed in a true residential area. So in many regards, I feel like the isolation of this facility from either these, the businesses that are flagged for these distances, again, because of what's already been stated, and really pretty much very limited kind of residential facilities anywhere nearby. It's not like it's in somebody's neighborhood or backyard. I think this actually turns out to be a very good fit, and I think probably allays some of the concerns that people might have if it were, again, just in a maybe more traditional residential setting.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher?
I'm favorable. And again, I agree with the location of it. It's not really something that's really conducive to just walking across the street and issues there. And, as far as the first part of the variance, I think it fits in well right there. And I think that as, there's different types of facilities further up Amherst Street, but I think we've seen some of that working in different areas up Amherst Street, so I don't see it, not working here, so I would agree.
Thank you. And my thoughts are very close to what Mr. Lionel, Mr. Shaw said. I mean, from site walking it, what's before us is the distance to the nursery and the hotel, and it's rather ideal. I mean, if you're gonna walk, it's actually much further than the quarter mile. That's really as the crow flies, and if it were how you're gonna actually travel, it wouldn't even be here tonight. And so I too feel it's actually a really ideal location. The only element I see about this property is it's always been when you want to pull into the driveway, it's a little tough because I think the traffic around you is expecting you to turn on the highway, and it's always been a little challenging to pull in there, but that's has really nothing to do with this case per se. That's a situation that's always been there, but that's just an observation. But for this case, I'm in full support as well. Somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make it.
Oh, go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Boucher.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance for Team AC Realty Trust owner of 230 Amherst Street, Sheet E, Lot 93, requesting the following: use variance to operate a residential recovery residence halfway house for substance abuse, and 2, a variance to allow proposed use within a quarter mile, 1,320 feet of a hotel, 983 feet proposed, and 1,272 feet from a nursery school / preschool. It is in the HB zone, Ward 1, Code Section 190-22, and 190-46, subsection D. We find that the variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property. We spoke about the location of this property right on the southbound on-ramp to Route 3, and how its position is across the Everett Turnpike and also across Amherst Street, which is very heavily traveled. And I will also note that crosswalks are way down on the other side of the highway to get across the street to get to these locations. So we find that that the distance is the barriers far exceeds the distance that we're looking at here, the barriers to that. The benefits sought by the applicant, we find cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than area variance. We find that it is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. It will not adversely affect property values of surrounding parcels. It is not contrary to public interest. In fact, we may state that it is in public interest to have a facility like this with the environment that is happening right now in the state of New Hampshire and other states. and substantial justice would be served.
Mr. Shaw is seconding the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Show of hands in favor of the motion to approve, and that's unanimous. So your use variance is approved, and good luck with your business.
Thank you very much. It's just unfortunate that we need these things, but at least we have them.
All right, and with that, I'll close the public meeting on case number 1. Keep moving right along and open the public hearing on case number 2. The owner is Michelle Brudeau. The address is 6 Syracuse Road, and the request is a variance to exceed maximum accessory use area. 40% is permitted, 50% is requested, and this is to erect an above-ground swimming pool and deck. This is in the RA zone in Ward 3. Hi, good evening. If you give us your names and address for the record.
Good evening.
Michelle Broder, 6 Syracuse Road.
Hi, welcome.
And Rob Campbell, also 6 Syracuse Road, and Michelle is the owner. And we live at 6 Syracuse Road.
All right, thank you. Could you walk us through your request tonight?
Yes, and I'll go through each of the 5 criteria as well, but broadly, just as an overview, as you know, it's, I guess, the ordinance that we ran afoul of is that you're allowed 40% of the living area of the home as detached permitted structures. And the home itself is fairly modest, which works for our family. The lot size is approximately 8,200 square feet. And if we were to build to the allowance, we would still only cover the lot by 21% total in terms of the home plus the detached structures. If you were to grant this variance and allow us to build the deck and the pool as proposed, the total, even though we would exceed the 40% of the living area allowed as detached structure, the total coverage for the lot would only be 23%. So it's 21% versus 23%. So it's fairly modest and I think typical of the neighborhood and less intensive than many of the homes there in general. So along those lines, going down the 5 criteria, the granting of the requested variance will not be contrary to the public interest because it does not essentially alter the essential character of the neighborhood or threaten public health, safety, or welfare. I mean, it is a pool, it's above ground, also the yard will be fenced in. It's a typical example of the yards in the neighborhood. I think I submitted some GIS information with the application showing other above-ground pools and decks and in-ground pools as well. Again, some of those uses are more intensive, but it's certainly keeping in space, keeping in spirit and in character of the neighborhood. Speaking of keeping in spirit, the next one, the proposed use will observe the spirit of the ordinance. I think likewise, I understand why the ordinance is in place to prevent too excessive of a use on the property. And as I highlighted with the 21 versus 23% coverage, it's still a low intensive use. And I think we're meeting that spirit. We also, in trying to meet as much as possible, we had planned a slightly larger deck. There was a second, when we purchased the home, there was a second shed. And so, again, in good faith, trying to meet that, we're going to remove the shed. We reduced the footprint of the deck from what we had originally planned as well, and trying to meet that spirit. Substantial justice would be done to the property owner by granting the variance. Again, it's part of ongoing improvements that will increase the property values of, certainly our property, but also I think the surrounding properties. It's a very nice neighborhood, quiet, and it's clearly there's generational people have been there. People have been raising their families for easily 50, 60 years, and there's that natural turnover, and we're a family with a young child. We're part of that. So in terms of substantial justice as property owner, we're just trying to do, what a typical family in the 2000s, what they may not have been done a while ago, but, to have an outdoor living and enjoy our property in that way. And it would benefit our property value as well as the surrounding in terms of it being part of a larger improvement to the lot and to the home. that goes, so that third point was about benefit to us, but to the fourth point of the proposed use will not diminish the value of surrounding properties. You know, the benefit can't just accrue to us, it can't be too much to us. Again, as I noted, it's part of a general improvement in the neighborhood of just people updating, and people maintaining their property and improving their property generally helps all the surrounding properties as well. And in general, just in terms of impact on neighbors as well, if it's, I mean, it will be nicely landscaped. Michelle's a wonderful landscaper, but there will also be screening, you know, as well. So it's, you know, there are existing fences and we'll maintain those. So should help the value, but also it shouldn't detract in any way. The fifth, the special conditions exist such that literal enforcement of the ordinance results in unnecessary hardship. I think this goes back to the spirit of the ordinance somewhat as well. It's a modest home. We're trying to do a modest improvement and make some modest changes to the yard. You know, if we built a house or added rooms that we didn't need, you know, ironically, to get it in order to, we would still have it allowed, you know, we'd be able to finish more space, and we'd be creating space that we don't need, heating a house, you know, heating square footage that we don't need, just to be able to get, you know, not changing the footprint of anything on the lot, and we would potentially be able to be in compliance. So I guess that's the hardship as I see it. I think where it's, you know, the ordinance are drafted to, there's a valid reason for them, and it's kind of like the 80-20 principle. You know, you can draft an ordinance that works 80% of the time or 90% of the time, and then there are those, you know, those times that arise where there are reasonable exceptions, and that's why we have the variance process. So I think that's where it runs into the literal enforcement versus the spirit and the intent. And also, so I think that's, unless you would like to add anything else. So then I guess we're done our rest of our case, or whatever the term was the preceding gentleman used. If you'd like to ask us questions.
Resting your case is fine. We often say that.
All right.
Mr. Lionel has a question for you.
When I drove by the other day, it looked like there was already construction going on in that part of the lot. Had you already started working on this?
No, not construction.
Not the construction.
Nothing permitted, but there is some landscaping that we plan to do in the back. We plan on, it's another thing about the lot, I didn't mention it here, but
Back is a significant hill.
if that whole neighborhood
Yeah, I
on
saw that.
Syracuse Road, it's a significant drop-off, and it only gets worse for the people further down the road. That hill comes further and further forward. So in order to make use of the lot, we're going to be doing landscaping. We're going to terrace across the top. We're going to put a seating patio over on the left-hand side, maybe something on the ground. So we are doing landscaping up there, but we haven't started deck construction. We wanted to, and that's why we filed the building permit, and then the building department was very helpful. We got a call later that day. She was very apologetic. I don't have the name at the moment. I tip my head and tip in my tongue or in my phone. She said, I hate when these applications come in for a deck during the summer and I have to give the person the bad news, but there's this zoning ordinance. So we haven't started construction. We certainly hope to. And so we're continuing to work on the landscaping that we can work on. And we're certainly, fingers are crossed that you'll vote tonight and approve it, and then we can start the construction. And we know, you know, there's the risk of the appeal that you had mentioned. So I think we would proceed and probably, we'll see where it goes. But yes, so we haven't started any construction.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Any other questions? I guess I have a question. When you had talking about removing a shed, you know, to keep the percentage down, is that something you've already done or would do? Was that the shed?
It's
that's
there.
kind of
It's something we're essentially offering.
Right.
You know, the shed exists, again, and trying to, I mean, could we use the storage? We could. Could we get along without it? You know, if that's what it would take to get the shed, you know, that's what we would, or to get the deck, you know, we would find a way to make means. So again, and trying to move towards, you know, that 40% stipulation. That was something we offered certainly in the plan.
Sure.
there.
I guess I have a question for Mr. Falk. Was the 50%, was that with or without the shed?
Yeah, it's without the shed.
Without the shed, okay. Just wanted to clarify that. I didn't have any other questions, so one more time. Any other questions? Are we all set? Guess we're all set. You can have a seat.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of the proposed above-ground pool at 6 Syracuse Road? Is there anyone with questions, concerns, or opposition? Questions, concerns, opposition, 6 Syracuse Road? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Anybody want to jump in first? Mr. Shaw?
I'm very supportive of this application. I think this is, I think it actually, the testimony was very well done and highlighted. I think this is a very kind of almost classic type of case where they're essentially, because of the broad brush kind of approach with some of the calculations, their modest home ends up penalizing them for the accessory use, yet the intensity of use on the property is really not anything that kind of really rises to a level of concern, I think. So basically, I think this is almost exactly why we end up hearing cases. This is like a perfect example, so I'm very supportive of it.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher?
I agree, Mr. Shaw. So I have no issues, and I support it completely. Interesting about the shed, I wasn't even thinking, or in my mind, that the shed would even go. So wherever that goes, but, you know, the shed that they're offering up. I guess when I look at the property, I look at what the unique property they have and what they are, and then I look at the neighbor on the left, and which I think would be, I look at the left side and look at the right side, and I don't see how, I guess, it would impact, or how I would even, for myself, say, hey, that has to go. So what I'm saying is, I support it, no matter how, if anybody, feels that they want to have that removed, then that's fine. I'll support it in any fashion.
Were you going to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, back to the shed question, because I don't think we really can, at least specifically, say the shed can stay if it wasn't part of the 50% calculation, then we're over what's advertised. So if they want to adjust it to, the deck to keep the shed and the
Right.
calculation, right? But that's what I understood from what Mr. Falk said. Yeah.
Sue, can I ask a
Yep.
question?
Yep.
This is where I was a little, so did I miss something here? Or you said you did the calculation without the shed?
With the shed?
With the shed? I
Without,
thought,
No, without the shed.
you said,
Without, I'm
you
sorry,
said without.
the shed.
Okay,
Without.
So
add
if the shed,
there's more of a,
it would
would
then,
be
Higher
52 or
percentage.
53%.
okay. So it was already offered up. So I guess what I got,
We advertise it with it off.
okay, all right, okay. I guess I got a little different impression from the testimony, but now I understand. Okay, so I'll retract what I said. Okay, thank you. I support the application as it stands. It was
Still in
shed.
support, all right. Mr. Lionel?
I have no issues, I support this.
Ms. McKay?
I concur, I have no issues, I support this.
I just wanted to chime in and say, from my site walk and the application, I concur with the testimony tonight, which is, you look at this property and it's very consistent with other ones on the street. There's pretty much all the houses in this side of the street have, there's like 6-foot fences, and with that hill on the back, they're kind of compartmentalized off. And that's like another situation where with this 50%, I don't think it'll almost be even noticed, after it goes in, because of the makeup of the yards and the fence. So just wanted to put that out there too, that, I concur with that testimony, and I'm in support of the application as well. Would somebody like to make a motion, or Mr. Shaw?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance for owner Michelle Brodeur at 6 Syracuse Road. The variance request is to exceed maximum accessory use area where 40% is permitted, 50% is requested, and this is to erect an above-ground swimming pool and deck, and this is in the RA zone. So the variance is needed for the applicant's proposed use of the property, which is the addition of the pool and deck. And because of the relatively modest size of the home, it quickly exceeds the permitted accessory use that is allowed. It's within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. It'll allow this property owner usage of the property consistent and similar to the others in the neighborhood. It was also noted that the overall difference between not allowing and allowing this variance request is the difference of only a couple percent, from 21 to 23% usage of the area of the lot. There's no testimony that there'll be any indication of negative effects on surrounding property values. The applicant noted, if anything, this would be a typical improvement of a property, which should only help neighboring property values. It's not contrary to public interest, and substantial justice will be served. And again, this is to approve this variance request.
And seconded by Ms. McKay. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, a show of hands in favor. So that's unanimous, so that's approved. Congratulations. You remember what I said about the 30-day window of appeal? You have every right to charge ahead. Should we get a request for rehearing, we would consider that request whether or not your pool is there or not, so you can do whatever you want with that, with your timeline. And with that, I'll close the, thanks, have a good evening. With that, I'll close the public meeting on case number 2. Are we good to keep going? All right, let's keep rolling along. I'd like to open the public hearing on case number 3. The owner is David James Shaheen. The applicant is A&D Clum Environmental LLC. The address is 26 Verona Street. The request is a variance to encroach 17 feet into the 20-foot required front yard setback to erect a 10-foot by 14-foot shed. It's Ward 6 in the RB zone. And what's being asked tonight is a deviation from code section 190-31. Hi, if you could give us your name and address for the record and walk
Sure.
us through your application.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Audra Clum of A&D Clum Environmental. I'm here to represent the Shaheens on their project. I'm a certified wetland scientist, so I did part of the wetland work on the project as well. The property is located at 26 Verona Street.
If you want to just pull that microphone out, you can
Okay.
just keep it with you, and that way, because once you walk away from it, it gets...
Before I do that, Mr. Falk gave me a call after I submitted the application and indicated that I had not located the property boundary accurately on the plan. So I had assumed incorrectly that the property boundary was somewhat close to the road and is in fact 7 feet away from the road, and therefore I had put my boundaries incorrectly on the plan. So I've revised the plan, and I can submit a revised copy now if you...
Sure, if you'd like to just bring those up and
Sure.
pass those out, we could take a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so I have not changed anything else in the application, just the location of the property boundary, which again, I assumed was the road edge, or somewhat very close to the road edge, and instead it is this larger dash line, 7 feet away from the road edge. And then I put the 20-foot setback, frontage setback off of that.
So if I could just jump in with a quick question, is the request remains the same to encroach 17 feet into the 20-foot required?
Yes, we spoke before that went out, so he adjusted the wording so that that was correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's advertised
We
correctly.
believe it's advertised correctly. And you can see on the map, you can see the shed is You can see the 20-foot front yard setback, and you can see the location of the proposed shed. The corner of it, just the corner is about 17 in, but it goes back. So it's not, the whole thing is 17 feet, it's just that one corner. But nonetheless, it is 17.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so the property is located at the south end of Verona Street. It is the last property on the, that side of the street, the east side. There's one abutter to the north and 3 on the west side of Verona Street. The Shaheens are wishing to install a shed on their property, a 10-foot by 14-foot shed. And in doing so, they need to meet their property setbacks. So I visited the property in April and delineated the wetland. This is part of the Salmon Brook Wetland Complex. And the wetland boundary is approximately in this area. It is shown accurately on the plans that you have, and I believe there's photographs in your package that show it as well. The wetland complex is a prime wetland, and therefore it has a 75-foot wetland buffer associated with that. The prime wetland buffer is this line right here. So this was measured in the field, and it was actually located on the property with little flags, plus or minus, a few inches here or there for topography changes. There is a steep slope here, so if you did drive by the property, you probably saw a level area here in the front yard, but then as it gets further back into the property, it does slope down pretty significantly there. So that's what that dash line is on the plan. So we try to locate the shed to the best location for them for their use, as well as to meet the setbacks. And the 75-foot wetland buffer cuts right through the property right here, and then it continues fairly close to the road. So there wasn't any point to move it that way. We didn't want to go into the wetland buffer and raise even more cans of worms, so we did what we could to try to locate the shed in a usable area somewhere near the front of the property. And this way it stays out of the wetland buffer but does encroach on the frontage setback. We felt that locating the shed in the frontage setback, even though it is somewhat close to the road, is not going to affect the public. It won't be contrary, to the public interest, because it is a dead-end road at that area. There are no abutters to the south side of their property, such that traffic would be high or there'd be an increased amount of pedestrian use in the area. The shed's not going to block any road visibility from abutting properties in that vicinity. The placement of the shed will not clutter the property such to reduce property values. It will not alter the residential character of the neighborhood, threaten public health, safety, or welfare, and would not otherwise injure public rights. The Shaheens keep a well-maintained property, and the installation of a locally made shed will not be exception to this. And we respectfully request your variance on this project.
Thank you, Ms. Klum. Are there any questions? I guess I have a question, and when I site walked, there was what I would call like a porta shelter or a tent on the property not far from where I think this shed is
It's about in
proposed.
this area.
Is the intent for the shed to replace that or to be in addition to it?
The owner of the property, Dave Shaheen, is here. Do you want to speak to that, or do you want to?
Sure, Dave
You could put
Shaheen,
that back
26
in there
Verona.
if you don't want to
Sure.
hold the mic, and it might be easier. Thank you.
Dave Shaheen, 26 Verona. And that's exactly why the Shelter Logic unit is there. It was a temporary shed while we went through this process. So when the shed is erected, the Shelter Logic tent gets taken away.
Okay. A couple other questions. I was just wondering, how long have you lived there, and how old is the house? Do you know?
The house is approximately 120 years old, and I've been there for 2 years. We bought it just under 2 years ago.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Any other questions? Nope. I guess we don't have any questions for either of you, so you could have a seat. Let's see. Is there anybody else to speak in favor of the proposed shed at 26 Verona Street? Anybody with questions, concerns, or opposition? We have nothing on record, so there's no opposition, so I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Thoughts? Anyone want to jump in? Maybe Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those where it looks like pretty much they were going, to be able to place a shed, something was going to have to be basically given relief for. And I think especially considering the location of this property, the dead-end street, that having this kind of encroachment into that front yard setback is actually quite reasonable, and we're having less impact to the wetlands and the buffer. So I think it certainly seemed like a reasonable choice, and I mean, I think the other options were, certainly could have been considered, but I think this still seems like it probably more greatly satisfies the intent generally of our land use code. At least that's the way I would kind of interpret, so I appreciate the choice that the applicant made.
We did. Ms.
Guide-
Plum and I did
guidance in
speak
that.
quite at length about the placement of the shed, and I think the overall sentiment was to stay away from the wetland buffer, have that be out of the question, and the front yard setback, the shed will still be about 10 feet from the paved right-of-way, so it's not going to impact any snow plows or any other utility trucks or utility lines, and it's the best usable location for the owners, to make it good for them, and we thought that was the best of all worlds, really, to do it this way. So it wasn't done without, there was quite a bit of thought into it, and
Yeah, and that's what it seemed like, and, kind of just my kind of gut feel about it is that is probably where I would have thought we would ultimately kind of decide in the context of, again, the intent of the land use code, so.
Thank you. Maybe I'll jump in and say a couple of observations. If this was a traveled street or something other than a dead end, I think I'd probably have some opposition to it being in the front, but it's obviously a dead-end street. And just another interesting thing, when I sidewalk, the house, which is very old, obviously predates zoning, is within that setback probably as much as the shed is. And probably, so that's kind of a special condition where, even though when I first got the application, wow, 17 into the 20, that's got to be really looking like out of place, but it's kind of right where the house is, and because of that situation, it doesn't really look out of place. I mean, another observation is I think the shed, at the end of the day, will look much better than the porta shelter, and it's much more permanent. And I agree that, if something, when you have a house that's this old, I mean, back then it was like build it as close to the wetland. There was no thought of wetland protection, and then, we get smarter a little later on. Things, something like this ends up here, so I'm in full support of this application as is. Ms. McKay?
I concur. I'm in full support, and based on the placement where you can see in your mind when you look at it and in the pictures, it actually looks like it's going to be tastefully done. I have no problem with this.
Mr. Boucher? Agreement?
I also agree.
All right. Would somebody like to make a motion? Mr. Lionel?
I'd like to make a motion to approve variance. Owner is David Shaheen. Address is 26 Verona Street. This is in the RB zone. The request is variance to encroach 17 feet into the 20-foot required front yard setback to erect a 10 by 14-foot shed. The variance is needed to enable this use of the property. The very unusual layout of the property and the prime wetland zone make the positioning of the shed really, there's no other possibility. The benefit cannot be sought by putting the shed any other way. It's within spirit and intent of the ordinance. It's a dead-end street, doesn't impact traffic, won't affect any surrounding parcels, so there's no parcel on that side. It's not contrary to the public interest, and substantial justice would be served.
And that motion is seconded by Mr. Shaw. Any discussion on the motion of approval? Seeing none, a show of hands in approval, that's 5-0. So your shed is approved, and good luck with that. And again, there's that 30-day window of appeal, keep that in mind. And good luck with your proposed shed. And with that, I'll close the public hearing, the public meeting on case number 3. Are we good to keep going? All right. I'd like to open the public hearing on case number 4. Case number 4, the owner is CCAM LLC. The applicant is TC Lycos. The address is 21 East Pearl Street, and the request is variance for minimum lot area. 6,007 square feet exists. 10,454 square feet are required to convert an existing building, which is currently approved for office use, into 3 residential units. This is in the RC zone. Hi, good evening. If you could give us your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is T.C. Liakos. I live in Nashua, Lamb Road in Nashua, New Hampshire. I own a business on 21 East Pearl Street. I've been in real estate for over 30 years, and I went to Nashua High here in the city of Nashua. I purchased this building probably from my uncle over 30 years ago, and it used to be a hair salon and 2 apartments. And I turned one of them into a small real estate office, and the floor used to be crooked. You know, it's one of those old buildings, 100-plus years old. So I made a decision in 02, 03 to convert it into a nice office building and to tear it down. And I came to the city, and I invested in the city, and I decided to build this nice office building since the courthouse was there, and I thought it would be a good use for office space. Well, as you folks probably have heard before, office space is not in high demand. The building has been pretty much empty, other than myself and that one lawyer. And after several years of trying to lease it, I've come to the conclusion that that the building is just deteriorating to the point where I think it's better use for residential. It used to be an apartment building. I'm asking this board to approve for 3. I believe it's already approved. You can do 2 apartments. So it's the way I constructed it. It's 3 townhouses, and it has 8 parking spaces. And there's 3-hour firewall in the back. It has a fully sprinkler system throughout the whole building. It's a very safe. Has 9-foot ceilings. Has crown molding. I mean, so from an office perspective, it's nice. Turn it into townhouses for residential use. It would be perfect. As far as to meeting the criteria that the board is seeking, the variance would not be to the contrary to the public interest, because I would not be changing anything to the exterior of the building. Nothing will be changed. The parking space is there. It's a brick front on the bottom, and then it has vinyl on top. As far as the spirit of the variance, it already used to be an apartment building, and I'm just asking to basically utilize it the same way. As far as some justice to be done, I mean, there is a hardship right now. What's happening is, in the middle of winter, I'll give you an example, and I've been dealing with this now for several years, and I've spoken to the police department and to the mayor about it. There's an apartment building across the street. I have pictures. If you want to see it, I can show it to you. I don't know if you've driven by. Right here, there's a multi-unit apartment building to the east of the building.
If you
There's
wouldn't
another.
mind just bringing those up, maybe
Sure.
drop
And to
those
the
with Mr.
east of the
Lionel.
building.
Just hold off on your testimony till you get back there.
This is the building across the street, and this is the apartment building directly to the east. Abuts directly. So what's been happening is, I'll give you a brief example. Monday morning, we had a big snowstorm. The people that are living across the street just use my parking space all the time because I'm not around Saturday or Sunday, or after 4 or 5 o'clock. I called the police department several times. It doesn't matter because because I guess the city ordinances has to be, if it's in a private parking lot, I have to tow it. Oh, they can't do anything about it. They can give a warning. So anyways, several times, I show up, I have one tenant, my Ellen Friedman, who's a lawyer in town for many years, and we're both trying to get into a parking lot. There's 4 cars parked in my garage, in the parking space, and they're all trying to plow out because my plow guy could not plow because they all live across the street. So this is just a small incidence for hardship, and I can name you many other, but I just think if I can turn it into apartments, have some tenants there. It's a nice space. They have parking downtown, walking distance to downtown if they're working downtown. And I just think the building, it'd be safer building. There'd be people using it 24/7. I just think, the spirit of it would just better utilized. And also, I believe there's a demand right now for downtown apartments, as you know. So, I don't believe there's going to be any unnecessary hardships to anybody for me requesting this variance. Matter of fact, I think it would probably enhance the neighborhood to have, more people living there. So I respectfully request the board to approve this variance.
All right, thank you, Mr. Liakos. Any questions? You've silenced us. Very good. I think we're all set. You could have a seat.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of the proposed conversion to apartments at 21 East Pearl? Anyone with questions, concerns, or opposition? We have received nothing. Questions, concerns, opposition, 21 East Pearl, none. So I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Thoughts? Mr. Lionel?
I drove by there. It's a nice-looking building with residences all around it. I don't have a problem with this.
Thank you. Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, I think even though it's, it's definitely more intense than what the code specifically allows for, I mean, this area already has a certain amount of other, higher density structures, and I think this is still kind of fits in with the rest of the neighborhood.
Thanks. Mr. Boucher?
I would agree.
All right. Mr. McKay?
I also agree.
Thank you. And I'll just throw in that I appreciate in our package, we had the floor plans, that showed the bedrooms and the kitchen. And to me, those look reasonable, accommodations for, a 2-bedroom unit. Certainly, it's a lot of overage, but, on the other hand, there's plenty of parking. If this was shortage on parking, that would be a real red flag with me, but with the 8 spaces, it's more than the code is, and it's much more than what's in the surrounding area. So in that regard, I think it's comparable or a bit better with the residences and around it, so I'm in support also. Ms. McKay?
One comment, in keeping with the city's objective to revitalize and to rebuild and re-energize, this absolutely falls into that, rather than have an empty building, which could draw vandalism or any number of things. He's looking to utilize it and to increase the value of the neighborhood rather than decrease it. This is a very good idea.
Somebody like to make a motion? I'll make a motion, I guess. I'd like to make a motion on behalf of the applicant, T.C. Liakos. The owner is CCAM LLC. Again, the address is 21 East Pearl Street. And for the record, the request is a variance for minimum lot area per code. 10,454 square feet are required. This building accommodates 6,007 square feet. And this request is to convert the existing building, which is approved for office use, into 3 residential units. And again, the section of code that's being requested is section 190-16, table 16.3. I make a motion to approve this request. I think the variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, which is 100% residential, given the special conditions of the property. And the special conditions are that this street is mixed business and residence. This specific lot had 2 residences on it before, and I think the board finds that this use for 3 units, 3 two-bedroom units, is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. I think the board finds that it's likely to enhance the property values of surrounding parcels to have a rather new building that's fully occupied versus an unoccupied office building. I think the board finds it's not contrary to public interest, and substantial justice for the landowner is served by allowing these 3 units. So I make a motion to approve as applied.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Lionel. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, a show of hands in favor. So that's unanimous. So congratulations. We wish you good luck with that conversion. And just remember, there's that 30-day window of appeal, which applies to everything we hear tonight, and that starts ticking tomorrow. And with that, I'll close the public meeting on case number 4. Are we good to soldier on here? All right. Moving right along, I'd like to open the public hearing on case number 5. The owner is Chapin Johnson, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. The address is 55 Manchester Street. The request is a special exception for a major home occupation for an in-home hair salon. This is Ward 3 in the RB zone. Welcome. If you could give us your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Bean, and I live at 55 Manchester Street in Nashua.
Okay, if you're going to be speaking, why don't you just give us your name and address there?
My name is Chapin Johnson, and I also live at 55 Manchester Street.
All right, welcome. If you'd like to walk us through your application.
Sure. So we'd like to convert our garage into a hair salon, a home-based hair salon. It's approximately 230 square feet. We're located, I'm not sure if you are familiar with Manchester Street, but we're located approximately 2 doors down from Janot's Market on the corner here. Next door to us is an apartment complex, and on the other side of us is also an apartment complex. We have room in our driveway for 1 additional car. It will just be me, the only stylist. Part of my goal is to use environmentally friendly alternatives to traditional beauty solutions, which are essentially very heavy with chemicals. So I'd like to lessen the impact on both the client and myself and the environment. So in addition to having less waste, because it's just 1 stylist, we can also factor that in as well. We will be keeping the exterior of the garage the same as the rest of our house, so that it looks nice, and blends with the rest of the neighborhood. Parking shouldn't be an issue because of, we have room in our driveway, and it's a pretty heavy traffic area anyway, with Janot's being right there. So I think everybody's used to having cars pull up in front of their house. But for me, I will only be having about 4 or 5 clients per day, about 4 or 5 days a week. Cover everything? Okay. So yeah, I don't know if you have any other questions, but.
We'll find out. Mr. Lionel does.
Okay, so your driveway has room for 1 car. You
Well,
won't be
1
able to-
additional car, I'm sorry, 1 additional car in addition to ours.
Okay, so the 2 of you have 1 car,
Mhm.
and then you would have one additional car. So it's obviously you won't be able to use the garage for a car. And I don't recall that there's any on-street parking at that point.
Yeah, they can park in front of our house as well.
You can park in front of the house. Okay. I'm just a little bit concerned about, if there's an overlap in clients and people finding parking.
There's typically parking in front of our house. We often have people from Janot's parking in front of our house, but there's always at least 1 or 2 more parking spaces in front of them when they are there. So, I mean, we have a good, would you say, probably 4 or 5 parking spots in addition to, about 4 parking spots in addition to the 1 in our driveway. at all times.
So, Chapin Johnson. Holman Stadium is also very nearby, which has all that extra parking
Oh, yeah, we're
when
across-
there's not a game.
Sorry. We're across the street from the park, too. There's a lot of parking at the park.
Yeah. I walk by that location frequently.
Thank you, Mr. Lionel. Any other, Ms. McKay?
This is my neighborhood.
Mhm.
I'm on Webster Street.
Okay.
And so I see cars parked all the time going up Cortland, on Manchester Street, down Sergeant Ave. There never seems to be a shortage, even they'll go around onto Stark, or Hall, excuse me, Hall is right there. I don't think parking is the issue. It wouldn't be an issue for me, and I can imagine that there's an awful lot of people who would utilize your service, in that neighborhood. I don't really have a problem with this at all.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw.
I think you said it now, and I think your application pretty much indicates it, but I just wanted to just get it verified. So the plan is you'll be the only one actually doing the work, that you're not
Right.
planning on having anybody else
No,
come
there
in to.
there really isn't room. I'll have a cutting station here, a washing station here, handicap backwards, a little area in the back here is my
Need to be by the
dispensary.
mic.
Oh, sorry. To keep my color and supplies and things like that. I think the cosmetology board requires at least 140 square feet per stylist, so it wouldn't be big enough for another stylist anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? Mr. Boucher?
Did I miss it, or just, what's the hours of operation?
Oh, I'll be open by appointment only.
By appointment only?
Yep,
Okay,
and
so it's-
typically Monday through Friday.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I thought it was on the application somewhere. All right, I think we're all set with questions. You can have a seat.
Thank you.
Are you here for this case, or are you just observing?
I emailed in something.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I don't have it.
Well,
Last Friday.
I guess we don't have anything. If you'd like to come testify, or I'm not sure if you're in favor or opposed, but you can let us know when you get to the microphone. You could give us your name and address for the record.
Yeah, I'm Glenn Bingham. I live at 73 Hannah Drive in Hollis. I am the owner of 49 Manchester, which abuts this property. I'm also the owner of Janot's Market. And my only concern is the competition for parking. Not knowing the parking plan, the overlap of clients is really what concerns me. If they have one spot off the street, the next client is probably coming in before that client leaves, so that client would be parking on the street. So that was my only concern. There's people parking all over the corner because of the store. I work very hard in coordinating deliveries, trying to keep the corner clear and safe for traffic. The parking of my customers is 5 to 10 minutes max. They're in and out, in and out, in and out. So, my concern is there may be a car or two parked out there that is there for an extended period of time that may interrupt with customers coming into the store. The store's been in that location since 1941, and, I try to run it, try to be a good neighbor, try to keep the intersection clean, the traffic moving, the trucks, delivery trucks off the corner. So that was my only concern, how the parking for this might interfere with the normal flow of traffic on that corner.
All right, well, we'll have the applicant speak to that, but before you run away, are there any questions from Mr. Bingham? Thank you for your testimony. You could have a seat, and if you'd like to come back and just clarify, we're hearing some concern on the overlap of clients.
I don't typically have overlap with my clients. One of the reasons I like working for myself is because in a typical salon, you get, stylists who are handling 2 or 3 clients at a time. They have a lot of, they don't get any breaks, and I don't like to stress myself out like that. So I typically schedule my clients, I may schedule someone for an hour and a half, and then I'll give myself a half an hour or an hour between my clients. So I kind of, start my day early and then take several breaks between people so that I don't have that overlap.
Okay, and I thank you for that. Are there any questions?
I'm just curious, obviously, you've been doing this somewhere else for a while?
Yeah, well, I have been doing people on the side at my previous house. We only just moved here in May. So just, friends and family, not anything official. But I would like to, branch out, so.
Okay, I think we're all set, thanks.
Okay, thank
Mr. Bingham, did you have the right to address what you just heard? Maybe you're okay with it and you can rest. Are you okay to just rest?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right, well, with that, I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Thoughts? Who would like to? Mr. Boucher's hand is in the air.
I was curious about the Janot's parking, so, in a previous job that I had, I used to go by there a lot and stop, and I remember sometimes getting right in front of the store, sometimes parking further away or having to park at the park. So I understand what Mr. Bingham's saying. Generally, I'm in favor of this application, and I think one of the reasons is that, the applicant is saying, hey, this is not a walk-in business, so it's not like 2, 3, 4, 5 people show up at once and then sit and wait to have their, their hair done, or I don't know what the correct term is, but, so I think it's by, she says by appointment. She's not overlapping because obviously she wouldn't be ready for the next client. I think I would hope and believe that, seems like this applicant, I think really is concerned about having a successful business. I think she heard Mr. Bingham, and I think, again, because it seems to be very low impact, I think that any issues, for example, if there was a problem where she had a client park where Mr. Bingham needs to have a delivery truck, I think that they could have a conversation and work that out. So I think in light of all that, I would be in favor of this application. Again, because the intensity is not what I think I would expect to typically see from a multi-station salon. So.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Boucher. Mr. Shaw?
I pretty much concur with Mr. Boucher.
Mr. Lionel?
The parking was really my only concern.
Ms. McKay?
Well, living in the neighborhood, knowing Mr. Bingham, patronizing Janot's for years, parking can be an issue, but I watch people move in and out rapidly. I have watched Glenn go above and beyond where parking was concerned and how he had it addressed, even to include working with, Nashua PD. I think that if there was an issue, it really could be worked out between Allians. I don't have a problem with this. And basically, when you explain that the requirements for the license or the area would only allow one stylist, and because you are going to give at least like half an hour between clients, you're giving me peace of mind to know. I mean, I know, I go to salons, I see people come in and out and how it works. But if you're doing that, then one car's leaving, you're breathing for a while, and you're bringing someone else in. So I think you've addressed Mr. Bingham's concerns. Thank you.
Mr. Boucher?
I just wanted to state to it, it's probably obvious, but to me, the applicant heard Mr. Bingham's comments. I think the applicant, if it was me, I would be telling my new clients, kind of,
Proper
this is
way, yeah.
where I want you to park, you know? And I think that she's gonna have those type of clients that are concerned about what products they're using. I think they'll be concerned about, you know, also what's going on in the neighborhood. So I think that would be, you know, again, it would be successful in that respect.
Thank you for that.
I agree, thank you.
And particularly your testimony, the local expert, my sense, I feel the same as what has been testified here among this board, in that I think the applicant, you know, is gonna be on a first-name basis with, you know, the Mr. Bingham, and my sense is that they're gonna wanna coexist just fine, and that I don't think that they're gonna be tripping up with parking, and the fact that the size of this proposed salon limits it to just one person, which is the owner of the property, who my suspicion is wants to get along with the neighbor. I think it's gonna work well. It is adding one car to the neighborhood that wouldn't be there if this salon wasn't there, but that can be accommodated in the driveway, and I find support for the application as is. Would somebody like to make a motion, Mr. Boucher?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the special exception for Chapin Johnson, owner, 55 Manchester Street, sheet 66, lot 76, requesting a special exception for a major home occupation for an in-home hair salon. It is in the RB zone, Ward 3, Code Section 190-47, subsection B. We find that it is listed in the table of uses. It will not create undue traffic congestion or unduly impair pedestrian safety. We spent a good amount of time discussing the parking issue. We had testimony from the abutter and the concerns about the parking for the market. We discussed and we believe that because of the low intensity of the project, of the salon, the business that the applicant's going to run, that we feel that they will be able to coexist and respect each other's clients and what their needs are at each location. It will not unduly impair pedestrian safety. I think I just mentioned that. It will not overload public water, drainage, or sewer or other municipal system. Special regulations are fulfilled. It will not impair integrity or be out of character with the neighborhood or be detrimental to the health, morals, and welfares of the residents.
Seconded by Ms. McKay. Any discussion on the motion to approve this special exception? Seeing none, a show of hands in favor. So that's unanimous, so that's approved. I wish you good luck on your business. And with that, I'll close the...
Can I make one comment to both of you? You're new to the neighborhood, and you're probably gonna, this is probably a plug for Janot's. If you want a really good sandwich or sub, that's where you go, honey. They're the best in the city. You're welcome.
Son loves
It's
working there,
true.
All right, well, with that, I'll close the public meeting on 55 Manchester Street. We good to keep going a little bit more here with the minutes?
Yes, we can do that. I just need to fill this.
We have minutes from July 11th. I had taken a look through those myself. I didn't see any amendments. There was one interesting comment in there. I just thought while we're discussing it, see if I can find it. I'm fine with the way it is. Oh, it was on page 3, kind of near the bottom. Speaking in opposition, questions or concerns, no one. Board members' comments all indicated support for the pedestrian bridge. I think that's a reasonably succinct way to cover that we had went around the table and everybody approved it.
I mean, everybody was kind of saying about the same thing, and I just summarized it into one sentence instead of all saying the same thing.
I hadn't seen that before, but I'm okay with it. I think it's accurate. Leave it as is unless anybody else disagreed. So that's really, it's just a comment, it's not a change. Were there any questions or amendments that anybody had? Seeing none, I'll make a motion to approve the July 11th minutes as presented, seconded by Mr. Lionel. All in favor? And I think you were in favor of that?
Can I vote since I wasn't here, or do I
You
have to
can
abstain?
abstain. So, we will have, you could just note that on the minutes for July 11th, Ms. McKay abstained, and that they were approved by Mr. Lionel Shaw, Boucher, and Courier. And do we have an agenda? We do. We have the agenda for the next meeting, which is August 8th. So we'll take a look at that to see if there's any regional impact. Mr. Shaw, Mr. Lionel are saying no. Mr. Boucher is no regional impact. I see no regional impact. And Ms. McKay is very busy.
Who seconded the motion? You made the motion.
Mr. Lionel
Minutes,
was the
okay.
second on that. Sorry, we're getting a little ahead of you. We'll just take a pause here. So that was a motion by me, and it was approved with your abstention.
Yeah, I wrote that and I got everything. Okay,
All
I'm
right,
good.
and then
Regional impact, no.
Regional impact, so you had, so that's unanimous because Ms. McKay sees no regional impact.
The next meeting, I also won't be here. I'll be, Marshall Wilkins will be here in my place.
You taking a vacation?
A
What?
little bit of a vacation, yeah.
You're not allowed.
Yeah, I'm entitled every once in a while, they let me out.
Was there any other business to be brought before the board? I guess before I make a motion to close, I just want to thank, while the microphones are still on, Jimmy, who's the man behind the door who's filming this. So I'm sure we appreciate that this is captured and out there in the public domain on video. So I make a motion to close, seconded by Mr. Shaw. All in favor? So we conclude at 8:02 p.m.